Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm the host, Sean Boyce. I'd like to welcome my guest to the show today, Brian Casel, who is the founder of ZipMessage, is a fellow podcaster from bootstrapweb.com. Hi, Brian. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Very excited to talk more about all the tremendous experience you have in product, because I know you've had repeat success in product, having built and sold also multiple product businesses. But kind of before we get started, it'd be great to go into a little bit more about your background. So wherever you kind of want to start would be great. And one burning question I know that I have, and I'm sure the audience is curious to learn more about as well too, is how you decide, what to work on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Really hard, really tough one to answer sometimes. I guess I tend to work backwards when I get asked that question. Today I'm very much a product person. I'm working on the product ZipMessage every single day. I talk to customers every day. I'm designing, I'm coding in the product, managing the feature roadmap, and just shipping. That's what I love to do every day. I've been doing it for the last couple of years on software products. ZipMessage is the one that I've been focused on for the last 2 years. Moving backwards, before that, I had several companies and products of all different types that spanned over the course of about 10 to 12 years before this, and those have ranged from other SaaS products, software as a service, to productized service businesses. I've had a course. I've done some coaching. I've done WordPress plugin products in the past, and even before all that, I did some consulting and freelancing. So I've sort of done it all over these years. So the other big chapter of my career before ZipMessage was a business called Audience Ops. That's a productized service business. They do content as a service, like a team of writers doing blog content. I ran that for almost 7 years, and I sold that business in 2021. Moving backwards, before that, I had a SaaS/service business called Restaurant Engine. That was like a website business, websites for restaurants and hotels, sort of half SaaS, half service. I did that back in 2011, sold it in 2015. During those times, I was actually running multiple businesses, like several side hustles. One of them was called Productize, and that is a course and a community and a coaching service, all about productized services. I have since sold that business as well in 2021. James Sowers has taken that over. There have been a lot of other like smaller products. Some of them didn't get off the ground. Some of them were just very much like side hustles, experiments and things like that. I'm always experimenting with stuff, but I'd say over the last 2 years, I've been the most focused on a single business, and that's ZipMessage, the SaaS product now.
So many questions from there, as you can imagine. And I can certainly relate to what is a key part of your history, where you've worked on a number of different things at different times, sometimes multiple things at the same time. So it's good to know I'm not the only one out there who's doing that as well, too. It's certainly not without its challenges, but it does make it interesting. The next kind of most relevant question I feel like I have for you, based on a number of things that you shared in terms of having started, run, and then sold several product businesses, is ultimately what has been part of your decision-making process when it comes to selling? And when do you kind of feel like, has there been any kind of pattern there in terms of like when you've decided to sell something? Yeah,
I mean, it's not like a process that I just continuously repeat, although I have sold multiple things. It sort of came about in different circumstances each time. But in 2021, I actually sort of just sold everything that I had in my portfolio, like all at once, with the exception of ZipMessage. Like that was sort of a decision in 2021 where I had just started to accumulate and build up a number of different products and businesses, some much larger and more significant than others. And I sort of just made the decision, like, I think at this stage in my career, I'm ready to just really go all in and try to focus as much as possible on a single business. So that was the main driver. And so in 2021, I essentially sold like 6 different businesses, but some of them were tiny, like just a couple $1,000s, others, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that was sort of just over the course of 5 or 6 months there, I exited everything except for ZipMessage. Back in 2015, I sold Restaurant Engine. That was sort of a decision. After 4 years of bootstrapping that, I was just a little bit burnt out on that business. And also, like, that was selling to the restaurant industry, and I have no personal connection to the restaurant industry. So I didn't really have any interest in like pursuing that as like a career-long company. That was much more of a learning business, if you will, and a stepping stone. I mean, it really was an impactful exit for me at the time, but it was sort of like my first base hit of a business, if you will. And then Audience Ops was one that I had held on for almost 7 years. I had considered selling it a couple times before I did, and then in 2021, I was sort of just finally ready to like move on to the next chapter in my career. And that's a productized service business. So what happened with that one was that I built it intentionally to a point where it was really running without me in the day-to-day. Like, I was not even touching that business. I had managers in place. I had a whole team in place. So it was like a nice business to sort of like self-fund all of my other software products at the time. But I think the market in 2021 was a good time to sell a business, good time to sell that type of business. ZipMessage was gaining steam at the time. So I just felt like it was the right time to sort of move on and also like mentally like get a lot of clarity and free up my mind space to like not have all these entities under my portfolio. So sort of a different circumstance on each one,
Yeah, it's super interesting. You mentioned a couple of things thus far that I wanted to follow up on as well too. One was the kind of that element of focus. A couple of different types of businesses in there as well too. So all largely product, but different kind of probably behind the scenes, the SaaS versus the productized service. I know we could probably talk a lot about that, but one thing in particular I'm curious about is first probably the kind of that focus element. I know that sounds like it's kind of a new chapter to a certain extent or phase that you're in at the moment, but how would you describe, ultimately what you had been doing is what it sounded like, focusing on either multiple businesses at the same time or businesses in different phases even at the same time versus now like the focus at which it sounds like is primarily on on ZipMessage.
Yeah, I think that before when I had all those business, like there was a period there between like 2014 and like 2020 where I literally owned and ran like something like 5 or 6 different active businesses. But the reality, and so around that time I was always known as like this person who has like a whole portfolio, many things going on. But the reality is I only actually spend my hours working on one thing at a time, and everything else sort of just runs on autopilot or on hold or maintenance mode until I return to it. And that worked fine. I mean, it did mean that like some businesses sort of just coast and they don't necessarily grow very much while I'm not focused on it, but that's sort of by design. There are some that I just wanted to let sit in my portfolio. And then ultimately in 2021, I decided like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to come back to these businesses and try to grow them. So I might as well just try to sell them. But I think that, if I'm doing anything that's like running multiple things, I definitely always want to try to work on something where I'm going to put a lot of effort into this. The effort happens now, but the return on that effort should continue even after I stop working on it. And that's especially the case when I was building a productized service business. Like I was never interested in being the one delivering the service, like doing consulting or doing like, writing articles for clients. That's what Audience Ops did. But I was never the writer on that stuff. So it was always like, let me build processes that other people can carry out so that this business generates revenue and it doesn't require me in the day to day. I mean, it's different now that I'm working on ZipMessage, where I actually really love working on the product every day. I have a small team working with me, but I'm not trying to like remove myself from the day to day now. Now I actually really get a lot of personal value out of working in this business every day.
That's cool. Do you think that's because of the type of work that you're doing? And is there like a novelty element for you, as in like it's an opportunity to learn to an extent? As in like, what would you credit to be the key differentiator between previous businesses where you had kind of the end goal in mind to build yourself out of them versus ZipMessage now, where you're getting a lot of engagement out of being involved in the day to day?
I think that it just really fits my personal, like just this model of a SaaS business, a software business. It really fits my personal strengths as a professional, and that is like I would say I'm a designer first. I would really like a product designer first, but I'm both. I do both design and technical. Like I'm a technical designer, so I like to design a product from the user experience all the way down to the database, and really have my hands dirty in all levels of that stack in terms of how the product is designed and executed, and ultimately the user experience and the value and the utility that it brings to our customers. So I like that whole cycle of like talking to customers, understanding what they need out of this product, and then designing the best solution, the most elegant solution, making it a really seamless experience. So like that whole creative process is that, even going back to my very early days, I started as like a web designer, essentially front end and design. But I've always loved that mix of like creativity and technical implementation, so being able to work on a SaaS product where I'm like on my screen right now, I've got code, I've got design open, and I'm thinking about what our customers need. So like that's just that's really enjoyable to me. I mean, I would say the nice thing, having done all those other businesses over the last 10 years, is that also helped build up sort of a tool belt of other skills, like marketing skills, copywriting, sales. I've done a lot of sales calls over the years across different businesses, talking to customers, getting really comfortable with like interviewing customers and doing customer research. I've gone pretty deep on that, especially in ZipMessage. And so like all those skills have helped to sort of build up, like, I think really every entrepreneur needs to get some chops on all those things. But having, because you'll hear a lot of advice out there, like, yes, you have to just focus on a single business. And even though that's what I'm doing today, I don't necessarily agree that that's the right advice for most people in their career, especially if you're earlier in your career. I think you're actually much better off doing multiple things, whether they're small products or service businesses, plug-in products, SaaS products, courses. You gain so much experience and just chops when it comes to copywriting or putting up websites or talking to customers or doing sales. Like these are skills that you're going to need no matter what business you end up settling into. So I feel like I've really benefited from like jumping around a lot in my first 10 years and then getting to a point where I'm a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. I figured out a thing or two. I'm still don't know what I'm doing on a lot of things. So, but I have come to a point where it's like I want to sort of point all that energy in one direction now.
I love that take, and I wholeheartedly agree as well too. It might seem counterintuitive based on some of the feedback, the common knowledge or whatever that's out there, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've really enjoyed being able to experience working on multiple things, because it enables me to make progress more quickly and figure out like the right overlap of like passion, proficiency, demand in terms of what it is I really want to focus on. So like you said, as you get a little bit older, a little bit more experience, that stuff starts to become clearer, and then you can always focus as well too from there. But you've got that experience and you've got a lot of these skills that are really important in product. And I've heard you mention the customer research element multiple times. Couldn't agree more. I would argue that is by far the most important, right? A lot of what you're talking about is important, but that one is super critical to making real progress here. Something you've been able to do repetitively, which is exciting. And perhaps we can dive into that maybe even a little bit more detail around the context of ZipMessage, which I'd love you to talk more about, since that's obviously your current focus now, what that project is, that value proposition. Then I'd love to go into, how a little bit more in terms of the philosophy or process that you follow from a customer research perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've really gone deep on customer research this past year in ZipMessage. So, when ZipMessage started, and this is still the core of what we do today, it's essentially a tool for asynchronous messaging. And it makes it really easy to just send a link to anyone, like a client or a customer or a freelancer or a coworker, and you can record video, screen, camera, audio only, or use text. And then you can easily go back and forth, all threaded on one page. So one asynchronous conversation all on one page. And it's a really easy and frictionless experience, especially if you're sharing a conversation link with a client or a small group that you're working with. And so, it just really makes it frictionless for someone else to be able to receive your link and click record and just start replying to you with, and essentially it replaces the need for like a Zoom call or meetings, calendar appointments and things like that. So that's where we've started, and we have a really great experience around that async communication piece. But over the last 2 years, one thing I've learned is that professional coaches they really get the most value out of ZipMessage. They use it to communicate with their clients. They do asynchronous coaching with their clients. Maybe they do some Zoom coaching, but then they'll use ZipMessage for messaging, with having like a message thread open with a coaching client in between their calls. They're using it for group coaching and running, group coaching programs. And so now we've gone through this process. We're still in the middle of this process of really building out ZipMessage into a platform that coaches can launch and build and run their coaching programs through. Again, it does the communications stuff, the messaging with clients at its core, especially with video and mobile and all that. But we're getting into things now where like we're building automation workflows, so you can have like interactive courses or interactive coaching, automated scheduled out messages going out to your coaching clients and things like that, mixed in with some personalized replies. So a lot of really powerful things around coaching communication. That's where we're sort of heading with the product. And all of that is based on, I've done maybe 40 or 50 customer interviews this past year, talking to coaches who use ZipMessage, a lot of market analysis, looking at our user base, our customer base, surveys, all that kind of stuff. It's all getting kind of folded into our product roadmap for ZipMessage.
Love it. And where I would love to go, well, there's two places I want to go, but the first one is, I've been here myself personally, and I know a lot of other product people have as well too. And it's one of the more common questions I get from folks that are trying to start new product businesses. And it's, I've heard you describe basically how it sounds like ZipMessage is a good fit from a product market fit perspective for these professional coaches. Love to know more about how you figured that out or uncovered that, because there's sometimes this like chicken and egg problem where it's, do I take my product and do I sell it to the open market and then wait to see who bites on it and then figure out like what the right combination of those might be from there? Or do I go like after a specific vertical and then try one, and if that doesn't work, go to the next one and keep doing it that way? Love to know if you took really either of those approaches or really what yours was and how you figured that out.
I've taken both now with ZipMessage, and to be honest, this has been a pretty big challenge, and I've taken a kind of meandering path through this. It's out of the gate when it started. It launched around in early 2021. It was pretty wide open, and I did pretty early on see the pattern of like there are some coaches using this. So I saw that, and I thought about niching down to coaches right from the get-go. But I also saw a wider range of users being really interested in and starting to use ZipMessage. So we saw just remote teams using it. We saw sales teams. We saw consultants, agencies. We saw coaches. And so I sort of just embraced that. Like maybe it's just a horizontal product we'll sort of launch it and open it up to everyone. And that's what we did for the first year. And it wasn't until about a year in that I started to notice that some users and customers are much more engaged than others. And that's where the research led me to, okay, we do see a mix of users, but the ones who are professional coaches are the ones who are the most engaged, the most active, the highest value customers. And so then I just went really deep into learning everything about what a coach does for a living and what their aspirations are and the tools that they're using and how they build their business, how they structure it, and because they actively use ZipMessage today, but we can and we should be doing much more for coaches to cover a lot more of their needs when it comes to running, group coaching programs and solo like one-on-one coaching programs, automated coaching, selling, the ability to sell access to your coaching programs. All of that is sort of being rolled into ZipMessage now, and that's all based on really deep research and interviews. And we've begun to design and ship a lot of these features now, and so I've showed the upcoming features to smaller groups of coaches and really getting buy-in on where this product is headed.
Love it. So it sounds like it was kind of a combination of both, essentially like keeping watch over those patterns and then seeing ultimately where traction was strongest, then looking for opportunities to niche down from there and then dive deeper from there, even with the research process. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about what your research process looks like how structured is it? Is it consistent from interview to interview? Do you roll like lessons from one into the next and just update the process moving forward? Like, what does that look like in order to get what you'd like to get out of that process?
Yeah, I do research in a number of different ways, and sometimes it's different at different phases of the business. And I've launched multiple new businesses over the last 10 years. And at the very beginning, like when it's a brand new business, maybe in like a pre-launch mode before the product is even ready, I usually start with a landing page that has an email capture for the early access. And after they enter their email, it goes straight to a survey with, I don't know, like a bunch of detailed questions where I'm asking them to freeform write. And then after reading every one of those survey responses, then I usually invite people to interviews based on their responses from the survey. And that's usually how I start with like early market research for a new potential product. Fast forward to a year or two into the product, and I have some like automated surveys in place in our onboarding process. So I could see, like that they'll check a box like I'm a coach or I'm a remote team or I'm a sales team or something like that. That gives us some data. But then I just started really just personally inviting customers to interviews. And over this past summer in 2022, I really dove deep using the jobs to be done methodology of interviewing. So I've done a lot of like async messaging with customers, and ZipMessage is actually really great for that. But I also went through a process of inviting people to actual live Zoom calls, 45 minutes plus, where I'm following the jobs to be done methodology of interviewing. So I started doing these interviews, and those followed a progression too. So early on, it was like, let's just interview like a bunch of our customers just to see who is the best customer. I interviewed coaches, I interviewed non-coaches, consultants, just SaaS teams, remote teams, whoever's using it. And out of that first batch, maybe like 15, 20 interviews, I learned like it's definitely coaches that are the best type of customer to focus on. And then I spent like the next 30 interviews just talking to coaches. And I adapted the questioning to them about how do you structure your coaching programs, which tools are you using, what are you trying to achieve, and how do you interact with customers and things like that. And then that's sort of like has informed what we're building and shipping now.
Love it. Big fan of the jobs to be done framework as well too. And like Clayton Christensen's book, competing against luck. Amazing stuff. Every product person should read that. So much valuable stuff in it. It's a great perspective to think through as you're doing the research element, and often glossed over. And it shouldn't be, because there's so much value in that as a process.
For sure.
Awesome. I still have about 1 million questions for you, but I know we're coming up on time. So the last one that I'll ask about, which is a super interesting topic, and I'll also give a nod to I love dog fooding a good product. So it's awesome that you're able to use ZipMessage for the actual research purposes. I hadn't even thought about that, but that's brilliant. So that's really
it's actually
cool.
Really, honestly, it's really great. It's not, I'm not trying to like overly promote it here, but one thing that I've done, picking up on the customer research stuff. So I have this like group of coaches that I started with like live interviews with them. And I did like the jobs to be done, 45 minutes to an hour, recorded the calls, took notes, all that. But after that, I've been staying in touch with a core group of them as now we're in the phase of like designing and building and shipping these features. So every couple of weeks, I send them a ZipMessage update on video to show them, here are some mock-ups of what we're building, or here's the roadmap of what's coming next. And then they get back to me with their detailed feedback. And I mean, I'm talking about like 15, 20-minute responses from customers, just going line by line, like, this is how I would use this. This is that doesn't look quite right. I have a feature request on this. Can it work this or that way? And just going back and forth that way asynchronously has been incredibly valuable.
That is really cool.
And I really believe that like live calls are good in some specific cases. I think for jobs to be done interviews, those are pretty good for live calls. But I really think that there's a bigger benefit to using asynchronous. It's not just that it's more convenient and we can do it across time zones and different things like that. It's also like having space in between our messages gives us that space to prepare notes. Like I often put a list of talking points on the screen before I hit record. We have the ability to pause and continue. We have the ability to edit a message before sending it back. You can discard it and re-record it if you want to say it a little bit tighter. I'll receive a customer's question or some feedback, and then I'll go take a walk or maybe respond the next morning. And so I'm coming back to them with a much higher value response, and I'm getting the same back from them. Whereas if we constantly keep getting back on these like live calls, then not only is it's draining on our calendars and everything, but it's also like we're on the spot. If I have a question for you and I want to get your honest feedback, you might just blurt back whatever is your gut reaction on something, but that might not be the true insight that I need. Like maybe you need a bit more time to think about it and consider your response, and then that's the nugget that I actually needed. But how many times do you look back on a live meeting or live call where it's like, oh, I wish I would have thought to say that, but I forgot to mention it in the moment. That's to me the value of communicating asynchronously.
That's really thoughtful element that I hadn't considered previously, and absolutely well said. You get to take time to really prepare what it is you want to say, and in the way you want to say it. It undoubtedly more than likely comes out more clear and concise probably every time. So it isn't just more efficient, it's also more effective, which is really interesting. So that's an exponential 100%. Improvement communication wise. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, my team, I've got a small team, a couple of other developers, a couple of people working on marketing stuff. We are 100% asynchronous. We're across continents too. But like I've never felt productive when I have meetings, like live meetings with my team. They're just more distractions. And again, it's that same thing of like, we're sort of on the spot here. But we send face-to-face video updates on a daily or weekly basis with we're having like detailed meetings. We're just doing them dripped out over a couple of days. And it's like, and we have really, really high quality interactions that way.
Very cool. So there you have it, folks. You can run a SaaS company asynchronously, right? Using ZipMessage.
We do stand-ups, like weekly stand-ups, just posting a 5-minute update into ZipMessage. Yeah.
So cool. I dig it. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I mean, I know there's a bunch of people out there that are trying to like hack meetings and stuff like that, but most of the time I feel like meetings, there's just so much waste, like real-time meeting, and they're expensive. So many people on them sitting there. Most people everyone can't participate at the same time, right? So it's only one person. And as you add people, then it becomes that much more expensive, like double and tripling. It's crazy. So
100%.
more efficient and effective async is better.
The other thing is that in ZipMessage, you have it all logged on one page. So, and it's really common that we'll have like some video, some are just text, and we transcribe every recording that you do. So
Nice.
it's all there on the page. And it also makes it easy to like, we literally have a little navigation menu where you can just like jump back to the message from 5 days ago.
Amazing.
And again, if that was like an hour-long Zoom call, you sort of just have to remember what was said, maybe hope somebody took some notes, maybe you recorded it, but then you got to like scrub through that recording to find that point. In ZipMessage, it's all there. It's all labeled. It's right there.
Love that, because even platforms that I'm doing async on now, like Slack, where I use pretty heavily for a couple of entities, I can never find anything. When I need something, it's very difficult to find. So I get the async benefit, but if I want to retrieve anything, I can't. That sounds like it solves that problem as well too.
Yep. Sure.
Very cool, man. Brian, thank you so much for being here. Super valuable as always. We're crazy excited to see what's next for ZipMessage. And that would basically be the question I have for you is there anything else you'd like to share with us? But more specifically, where can people go to learn more about ZipMessage and find out if it's right for them?
Yeah, I mean, ZipMessage.com, that's where it's all happening. And one of the cool things is you can like reserve your own name, right? Like, so like I have an intake page where anyone can message me at ZipMessage.com/Brian. So, every account gets that. So yeah, I mean, it's all there. We are really active on the roadmap right now. We're about to ship automation workflows. We'll be shipping a thing called programs and spaces, sort of like small community spaces for coaches, and then payment options coming up. So all that stuff is coming in like early 2023.
Super cool. Very exciting. And I'm encouraging all my listeners to go check it out. I've seen multiple products that Brian has built, and they've all been amazing. ZipMessage is really cool as well too. Anything that I'm obsessed with efficiency, and ZipMessage really hits that nail very well. So check it out. You could be just not more effective, but you can be more efficient as well too. So thanks a ton for being here, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Product Launch. I hope you got value out of it. I like to feature product people on my podcast because that's who I love to help. I'm a product strategist, and I can help you scale your business and grow your profit through a product. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you, email me at sean@nextstep.io. That's Sean, SEAN, at nextstep.io. Or visit my website at nextstep.io. That's nxtstep.io.